Well, hello there, you're watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. Time to see what's making the headlines then, with the journalist and broadcaster Jenny Kleeman and the PR consultant Alex Deane. Fabulous
hello.
to see both of you. And welcome, Alex, your first go back in the studio.
Thank you very
after
much. Good to be back.
several years, we think, don't we? Anyway, let's take a look at the front pages, shall we? The arrest of 5 suspected Russian spies, top story for the Metro, with their headline, Putin spies seized in the UK. The Eye picturing 3 of the suspects and describes them as Russian spies arrested in UK suburbia. A similar theme in the Mail, which calls them spies who came in from suburbia. This is the front of the Mirror, the spies next door, the headline there. The Guardian explains that those arrested are Bulgarians suspected of spying for the Russian security services. The Times says they'd been posing as journalists before their arrest. Well, the Telegraph labels them the Northolt spy ring because 3 of them were arrested close to the RAF base, frequently used by the royal family, amongst others. Daily Express says, meanwhile, there's another big rise in the state pension coming next year, thanks to a large increase in wages and the triple lock, which decides how big the rise should be. The Financial Times reports on moves to buy into and break up one of the big 4 financial consulting firms, EY, formerly known as Ernst & Young. While the Sun looks ahead to the Women's World Cup semi-final tomorrow, urging the England Lionesses to waltz past the Matildas. And finally, the Star reports that the graves of the fabled Knights Templar have seemingly been found after 800 years in a church in Staffordshire, a discovery it says is worthy of the Da Vinci Code. Anyway, don't forget, scan the QR code that you'll see on screen during the programme. Check out the front pages for yourself of tomorrow's newspapers while you listen to our guests and head straight to them, Jenny and Alex here. So, Alex, talk us through what we know so far and what the papers have been able to find out about this case, which has been slow to emerge, hasn't it, really?
It's been slow for us to find out about, but we must expect our security services to have been on this for quite some time. 5 people so far, no sense of whether there are other cells involved that are going to be drawn into it. 3 charged and 2 further being questioned. A couple of interesting things about it for me. The use of Bulgaria as a cover country by the Russians is a very old story. You may recall that in From Russia with Love, James Bond runs into a Bulgar connection, and that's part of the story here. A further one is a kind of double bluff being suggested, where one of the people concerned declared on his LinkedIn profile that he was a signal intelligence expert. Well, yes, now I think we know what sort of signals and intelligence you might have been providing.
Allegedly, of course.
Allegedly, of course. But moreover, it sits within a picture in which the current head of MI5 has said that more than 100 Russian spies have been deterred from entering the United Kingdom since 2018. It sits in an environment where David Smith, of course, was arrested and sentenced to 13 years in prison for his spying in our embassy in Germany. And it just seems that some of these people have been here for quite some time. We have been penetrated by a foreign intelligence that does not wish us well.
And, you know, the picture it paints also is of a Russian president who will not stop at whatever he needs to do to reach his means, amidst the context of war, obviously.
Yes, absolutely. Although, by all accounts, these people had been living in this country for quite a long time, so it's not a sleeper cell that was created in response to the Ukraine war. I mean, these people have been here for quite a long time. And it's quite interesting because we now feel like we're in this different digital age and that spying still happens through hacking or spy balloons or this kind of thing. This shows that old-fashioned sleeper cells who can be people that are trusted by a foreign agent within a country it's still a method of espionage, and we haven't had arrests of Russian spies in this country for a very long time. But if you think about it, there are many unexplained things. You know, at this stage, we don't know what these specific people were involved in. But, for example, things like the Novichok poisoning, there are many things that we don't know. How was the Novichok brought into the country? So it is useful for foreign agents to have people planted in this country who can be called upon when necessary. And what's really interesting in the reporting, because obviously the story broke earlier on today, these people were arrested on the 8th of February, and it's only been announced today. And reporters have been out getting information about them, and they very much were embedded in their communities. They were the spies next door. They made cakes and pies for their neighbours. They lived in Harrow and Great Yarmouth in Norfolk. The 2 of them, who were a couple, apparently used to give classes on British culture, life in the UK, to other Bulgarians. So they were very good at kind of integrating themselves. So this is not something that's just in response to the Ukraine war. This is a long-term, seeded strategy to have useful people, if these people do turn out to be spies, useful people embedded in the British community.
Let's just briefly pick it. And this front of the Daily Mail, I stress this person is not me, who's on the left, contrary to the views expressed by many wags online before appearing today. It's worth mentioning that, of course, whilst these people were foreign nationals, a number of the people who've been interviewed, interrogated, accused and indeed convicted by British authorities have been British nationals who've held sympathy with intelligence or activities from abroad, including Smith, who was arrested and convicted because he had sympathy for Putin's invasion of Ukraine. But Melita Norwood was, of course, the granny spy in suburbia. You can have an agent or a source for some decades. And part of the point about sleeper cells isn't necessarily that they spy directly. It's that they provide succour and support when those who are spying directly are in trouble or need them. And so that we don't know yet whether these people were directly involved in a great deal of espionage themselves. They may have been, the allegation may be, that they were going to be called up to support those who were involved in the front line.
And the specific allegations, if we look through The Guardian, I mean, nearly all the newspapers are leading on this.
Yes.
In a sense, it's a news story for newspapers to get their teeth into in August as well, isn't it? Is about identity fraud, I suppose, isn't it? That's the point for the specifics of it.
There are some quite remarkable details that have come out. What we do know from their arrest is that they were caught with an enormous number of documents on them. They had, apparently, passports, identity cards, papers for the UK, Bulgaria, Italy, Spain, France, Croatia, Slovenia, Greece and the Czech Republic. The Times is reporting that they had fake press cards and clothing, allowing them, if they had wanted to pose as journalists from Discovery or National Geographic. That would suggest people either who are holding these documents and materials to help other people pose or people who could do it themselves. But this is sophisticated stuff. This is not, one or two phony documents. This is a systematic, state-sponsored thing. To have so many documents, not just from states, but also from broadcasters.
Drawing out that detail about posing as that which they were not, as journalists, it's also reported that they didn't just do that in the United Kingdom. The same people are accused of doing that abroad, from the UK, using us as a base to spy on friendly countries like Germany. So if these allegations are true, it'll be rather like, you may recall, Angela Merkel said friends don't spy on friends when it turned out the Americans had hacked her phone. It may be unknowingly we were hosting those, not just spying on us, but spying on our allies as well.
And the Telegraph makes something of the proximity to an RAF base as well. The Northolt spying they talk about here as part of these allegations.
Yes, I mean, we don't know the details in all of this. Proximity means a kind of physical proximity there. I mean, one of the things that I found really interesting that is kind of brought out in this Telegraph reporting is if people have been in this country for a decade, how are they uncovered? Is it through intelligence? Is it through some whisperings coming back from Russia? Or have they slipped up somehow? And it's gotten some interesting detail here. The Telegraph have clearly, dispatched their reporters, their 3 reporters on this story, to go and talk to neighbours. And one of the neighbours of the man in Northolt said that the Bulgarian claimed to have worked for Interpol and tried to erect a huge satellite dish on the side of the property. Subtle. So either that's a very clever double bluff, or perhaps, they got a bit arrogant, they got a bit lax, who knows. But, it's quite interesting what some of the neighbours are saying, a lot of them saying that they had no reason to doubt them, that they paid their rent on time. She was very good looking, apparently. It's one of these things where it's like, right, let's scramble our reporters and see what we can find. We don't know very much at all. It is all the stuff of spy novels, really. But what's interesting is that this is still going on at a time when we expect that everything is done virtually. Human beings with eyes and houses and safe houses are still important. Human intelligence still vital, and there will be a film made one day, I have no doubt, and it'll be interesting. But the part of the film that we don't know yet is to your point about the uncovering. And normally it's either a stroke of good luck, or despite the hard work of our intelligence services, it's a stroke of good luck in catching somebody, or it's because somebody has grasped. It's because somebody internally has said within the Russian system, Britain, you're being spied upon, and you might start looking at these people. And if that's the case, I hope the person who put their hand up is safe and secure tonight. Because one thing we do know is that Putin does not tolerate any kind of dissent. As we know from Novichok and Polonium-210, remember those cases all too well. I think the Times is also leading on it. Have we got that one too? You've probably seen it.
There we go. Russian spies accused of posing as journalists, the point you were making earlier. Once again, picturing those three who have been charged. Trio used forged press cards to carry out surveillance, the police claim. Again, it's allegations, as we have to stress. But of course, journalists get access into areas that other people do not, is part of the point you were making.
Yes, and as somebody who's a journalist who relies on this kind of accreditation, that's very worrying that people could think that you're a spy. Quite often you go to certain countries and people assume if you're a journalist you are a spy. This kind of thing won't help. But this reporting's suggesting, from what the Times has heard from the police, that these are not people who are holding documents for other people. These are people who are using the documents themselves to get intelligence.
Yeah, that's right. And I suppose one other thing to add about their circumstances is that traditionally within espionage, one sleeper cell or one cell doesn't know about the activities of another. So you're not likely to get that much useful intelligence from these people about ones we haven't discovered yet, which will always leave us guessing the known unknown. Who else is there in Britain? If we've caught these people, is it the case that we've found 100% of the spies? That would seem unlikely, wouldn't it? And therefore you don't know how many others there are alongside them.
That's the thing. In the front of the Mirror says the spies next door, and that's the thing is, look at your neighbours closely tonight, as the Mirror is saying. You never know.
I'm sure they were mostly fine. Anyway, lots more still to come in the next part of our programme, including the very latest on the new allegations against Donald Trump. That and more after this.
So much nicer.
Welcome back. You are watching the press preview with me once again, the journalist and broadcaster Jenny Kleeman and the PR consultant Alex Deane. Welcome back to both of you. Let's turn to Trump, shall we? We've moved through allegations concerning Putin, effectively. Now on to Trump. It's like the old mood music, isn't it? Here we are. Trump charged using mafia laws over the election in 2020, once again. And Jenny, this time in the state of Georgia, which has implications, really, for the case.
It does, because these are not federal charges, they're state charges. So if he were to become president, he can't pardon himself. These are racketeering charges that are normally reserved for mobsters, which have a minimum jail service or jail term of 5 years. And it could potentially be televised, this trial, which the other three charges, because this is now the fourth criminal charge. He's got 91 felony charges against him. 4 trials happening next year. 2024 is going to be a busy year for him if he's the Republican candidate, because as well as trying to become president, he's also going to be fending off all of these charges in court. But this one is significant, even though you might be struggling to keep up with all the different charges against him. This one is significant because he may have to appear in court on TV, and he has 10 days to answer. But, you know, he's facing a minimum of 5 years in jail if he's found guilty.
Of course, no matter who the defendant is, no court will convict you in absentia because you're busy defending yourself in another court. So realistically, he can't get through, he can't be the subject of all these trials before you get to the next election. One thing everyone agrees on is that if you're going to do this properly, it's going to take time to go through evidentiary processes and taking testimony and so forth. The idea of doing these 4 back-to-back and trying to get it done before November, it seems pretty much impossible to me.
But even one would be clashy with things like Super Tuesday, wouldn't they? Do you know what I mean? Are you suggesting that they won't get any of them done before the election?
I mean, you could certainly see at least one being resolved, but the challenge for the Trump campaign seems to be blithely dismissed, which is, well, so what then? We'll just carry on. Jenny is right. The Georgia case is different in kind because it's one that he wouldn't have the prospect of directly being able to pardon himself. There is a pardoning procedure, but it's by a panel that would be in Georgia and can't exercise its powers until you've served a portion of your sentence. So it's the least attractive one for him to get convicted on. People will naturally look at this and think the federal charges are the most serious and significant. Actually, it could be the Georgia one that's most challenging for the Trump campaign. But it is worth thinking about the fact that, traditionally at least, state-level charges would give way to federal charges in the kind of precedence of batting order. So if you faced a traditionally more serious federal charge, that might get heard first. I think Trump's critics would rather like the Georgian one to be taking prominence, given the severity of the potential outcome for him.
Yes, and a 98-page indictment, very detailed, complex. One described the federal or the Washington indictment we had only recently as sort of a bit like Hemingway, you know, pithy and short.
Yes.
And this one is a bit like War and Peace.
More
It's
narrative.
complex.
It's more narrative.
More
yeah.
narrative.
There's so much to go into.
Yeah, the FT on the front page as well. Lots of people talking about this woman we see here, that she's a Democrat, that it's politicised, etc., etc.
Which is, of course, what Donald Trump has said. He's always said that this is a witch hunt. Each of these charges is always a witch hunt, which is strange because every time he's indicted, his poll ratings go up. So if it's a witch hunt, it is not one that works very well. It doesn't, it emboldens his base. And again, I think, as somebody who loves the United States and who cares a lot about geopolitics, it's so depressing for me that there seems to be no way for the Republicans to find someone better that their base is going to go for than somebody who's facing so many charges and bringing the country into so much disrepute.
Look, I do point out, just gently, that the candidate for president, past serving president, is entitled as much to the presumption of innocence as the supposed Russian spooks we just spent the first half of the programme discussing. But
yes, he is.
What I will concede is that he, just taking his behaviour on air, which I'm entitled to judge entirely, I thought he behaved disgracefully after the result of the last election. And I therefore think, whether he's convicted of any of these things or not, we are as entitled as anyone else to say, as great friends of America, like you, I love the country, is this contest the best that the Americans can do? For perhaps the most important job in perhaps the most important country in the world, is it really right that Joe Biden, who cannot now finish a sentence, is going to face Donald Trump, who may get many sentences? Is that really what we're going to... thank you. Is that really what we're going to have on offer?
And they're both going to be in time of fighting all of this, and they're both old, and, God help planet Earth if this is what the leaders of the free world are fighting over and about.
Yeah. OK, should we get a bit of football, which I know is your favourite subject, both of you. But anyway, all eyes, obviously...
I'm keen on the football.
OK, right, OK. Well, I'm not sure. Jenny...
Well, I'm like, yay, English women, go for it. I know they're in the semi-finals tomorrow, big rivalry between Australia and England.
There you go.
That's the limit of my knowledge.
Stop.
Well, let me say something different to that, which is that having spent quite some time in Australia, the ferocity of the Australian support base is not to be underestimated. And one of the things that is rightly pointed out by those who so strongly want to support the growth of the English game, in the English women's game, is that they just don't draw the same kinds of crowds in week-to-week competitions in the UK competitions, in English competition, as the men's game. So our women have not been exposed to quite the same... Of course, they did fantastically in the Euros, but they haven't walked into a stadium of 80,000 people baying for their blood in a way that they are about to. Talk about an 11th, 12th, 13th person on the pitch for the Australians. That's quite a significant contribution.
Yeah, won't make any difference at all, will it?
I hope not.
No,
I hope not.
Anyway, it's a morning game, so we can watch, which is good. Often they're at this time of night, and you sit there trying to watch it on a small telly. But anyway, we will look forward to watching that, and look forward to seeing you shortly as well, both of you. Jenny, Alex, thank you very much indeed for now.